Hi there, this is Matt Blick from Beatles Songwriting Academy with a review of this book, Revolver, How the Beatles Reimagined Rock and Roll by Robert Rodriguez, who's a pop culture historian who's authored 9 other books, including 3 other books about the Beatles. Well, full disclosure, Revolver is my favourite Beatles album and has been from before I started Beatles Songwriting Academy, and 5 years in, nothing's changed my mind about that. So you would think I would rush out and get a book like this as soon as I saw it. Its thesis is that Revolver was the true game changer rather than Sgt. Pepper, and that's one of the reasons I avoided it, really, because it just seemed to be an argument in book form, a long argument. And as I hunted around Amazon for reviews, I saw the author entering into arguments with people who'd reviewed the book and had differing opinions of it. So that put me off for a long time. But I managed to pick up a cheap copy and I thought, what the hell? So I read it. The reason I enjoyed the book so much was that it's not a long argument. It sets the Revolver album, its writing and recording, in a brilliant historical context. It's filled with anecdotes that I had not come across before, great quotes from the Beatles, from Ray Davies, from press conferences. But the context, the historical context, is the thing that really brings it alive, as through every song you get to understand what the Beatles were going through, what other events were happening in arts and in the world. And he does such a great job. He also does a great job with research. So he disproves George Martin's assertion that he was influenced by the soundtrack to Fahrenheit 451 by pointing out that that was released after Revolver, so he hadn't even heard it then. And it's well written and wittily written. Finally, the book is great on making clear the differences between the mono and the stereo mixes of the album, which are radically different from each other. Bad points? Well, there's only one for me, and it is a minor one, and it is the Sgt. Pepper versus Revolver argument. There's a comic that Marvel used to do occasionally called What If, and it would do stupid things like what if a spider was bitten by a radioactive human and things like that. And they're very interesting little diversions, but at the end of the day the answer is always so what. And though it's very interesting to learn that Revolver was created in a perfect storm of bad publicity, bad experiences in Manila, and with the fundamental Christian record burnings in the States and death threats, and so many things just conspired to bury Revolver in bad news and not give it the warm welcome it deserved. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, so much conspired to make Sgt. Pepper the right album at the right time, probably in music history, not just in the Beatles' career. Sgt. Pepper would have been a massive hit, whatever it sounded like, and Revolver would have relatively disappeared without a trace, no matter what that sounded like. Granted, but that it is what it is. That is the world that those albums were released in, and so what? When Rodriguez ends up quoting a blogger who writes under a pseudonym as support for his theory, you know he's on very shaky ground. So I don't think the argument held up, but I don't think it mattered. It's not something worth arguing about in my mind. I love Revolver. You might love Sgt. Pepper. So this is a very good book. If you're thinking it's just going to be a 200-page anti-Sgt. Pepper rant, it's not at all. It's really interesting, full of great stuff, and I'd highly recommend it. Please check out my other reviews and songwriting posts on Beatles Songwriting Academy at beatlessongwriting.com.